Autry J. Pruitt. Listen, I teased you a little bit at the beginning about why you need to be back in time to listen to Autry. And if you got your workbooks out, which you all should have your workbooks out, I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just asking you, do the strategic thing, do the thing that's going to empower you so that you can take action. Here's what I underlined about what he does. He says, I mean, look at all this stuff. This is his background. It hardly fits on a page, but I'm going to call something out. We have to get people that are not in this room in this room. How are we going to do that? How are we going to do that? He's able to reach out to non-traditional conservative audiences. Wow. AKA, he's able to speak to other people other than the choir. Because we get together, I've been in those conversations, and we start talking, and we get excited, but it's all preaching to the choir. And that's okay to start there, but you heard what Laura Zork said. She said you got to move beyond complaining, beyond all of that, into action. He is pushing back against identity politics and victim and culture. Folks, on January 6th, we, the people that keep this country running, all of a sudden, many of us became victims. We started hiding. January 6th is when all that stuff went down in Washington, D.C. And it was not what was reported, as you all know. I was there. But we have become victims. We can't do that. Autry is fearless. Ooh. We need to be fearless. Look, I could keep going, but you're here because you want to speak, listen to Autry, and you're going to take notes about what he said. Take notes, because that's how you're going to take action. Autry, thanks for being here. Please come on up, sir. He is the CEO of Save Florida Schools. He's committed to faith, country, and conservative values. He's the founder of the New Journey PAC. Thank you very much for being here, Autry. I really appreciate it. Yes.
Thank you so much. Does this one work?
This one, yeah. In fact, let me just...
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. When I gave my very first sermon, I was 14 years old. I remember my grandmother said, now listen to me. Please don't make the folks glad twice. Glad when you get up and glad when you sit down. So it's in that spirit I'm going to try to move. Oh, that one's fine. Thank you. It's in that spirit I'm going to try to move through this relatively quickly. First, I do want to say, Raj, I got a tiny bone to pick with you. Not all brown folks can sing. She can sing, I can't sing. So you not only brought her up for an A selection, but an A and B selection before I got ready to speak. So we got some problems, brother. We got some problems. I'm glad to see everyone's here. I do want to make a comment before I get into the words. You know, we're used to, those of us who are of the Christian faith, we're used to hearing about individuals who help out the human race, right? We're used to knowing that Adam was a man who started the race, for example. We're used to noting that Abraham solidified the promise. Moses was a leader for the race, but what we often forget is that there were women who birthed each of these men. I know that's not the popular narrative now, but it still takes a woman to give birth. And there was no human race without Eve. Abraham couldn't have fulfilled his promise without Sarah. Moses was saved, anybody remember? By who? A woman, Miriam, right? The marcher Joshua was told when to march by Rahab. Bathsheba birthed Solomon. Elizabeth, John the Baptist. And it's in that spirit that we need to give our hands together. And although it says I'm the CEO of Save Florida Schools, there's two people in the room that make it work. Two women, Bev Kilmer and Karen Show. I was in public school as a little kid, and I had a very, very hard time. And the school system there wanted to shove me, and did for a few months, full of Ritalin at that time. Now, I don't know if they use Ritalin now, right? I haven't heard it in a while, but they wanted to shove me full of Ritalin. I had too much energy, I was too rambunctious, I was too lively, I liked to speak out too much, etc. And that was the solution, was medication. My grandmother, a God-fearing woman, stepped in with my mom. They maxed out credit cards, they took out loans. I did not know this until later. And did that to send me to a private school where all white teachers, with the exception of our principal, Dr. Kulasekara, who happened to be from Sri Lanka, loved me and nourished me and changed my life. Changed my life. I got to Albion College. I'm skipping a little bit, and I was there. Albion was always a liberal, and I mean liberal as in left, not as in classically liberal, institution. Several professors noticed me. They believed half of what I believed. Do we have any kids in the room that can repeat what I'm saying? Half of what I thought was BS, I'll say it like that, was thought what was BS, but they recognized a promise in me. And a very, very liberal professor by the name of Dr. Mark Levin, a very, very liberal professor, and Dr. Kim Tunnicliffe, who actually was a Democrat member of Congress at the time, pulled me aside and said, listen, you're espousing a lot of beliefs, but you don't have a really good foundation. So they gave me Hayek, they gave me a guy by the name of Learned Hand, they gave me all the Federalist Papers, by the way, to read. They gave me John Locke, they gave me Frederick Douglass's book as a separate assignment, and because this wasn't on the regular syllabus. And they said, we don't believe what you believe, but we understand the foundations of what you need to know to go where you're going. And this is what you should know as a background. Those were real educators and those were real teachers. And in that spirit, we need to start asking ourselves, what does a quality education provide you? Now, I'm going to talk about Save Florida Schools in a moment because it's relevant later on, right? I got about 28 minutes left. But we need to understand and come to grips with what a quality education provides a person. What does it mean to have a quality education? Does it mean there's a comma in the right place? Does it mean that you know the difference between Oxford and serial commas, semicolons and colons? All of that is important. But what does a quality education mean? And I submit to you that a quality education lays the groundwork and the framework so a kid can draw from that education and determine their own way of thinking, their own thoughts. I shared with you what I shared with you about my college experience so that you will know that even when I went to college amongst left-wing professors, very left-wing, they understood what a quality education meant. And it meant that you had to have a framework, and this was in college, by the way. You had to have a framework in which to start so a kid could be able to draw from that framework to formulate their own conclusions. Now, if that's important in college, imagine how much more important that is in high school, junior high, and the elementary level. And what we've moved into as a society today, that we want to teach everything but what quality education means. And as we begin to formulate our school boards and educate stuff as parents, I say school boards need to focus on what does a quality education mean. You need to answer that question first. What does it mean to give my child a quality education? And a lot of times we ask ourselves that question, but we come up with answers that are check marks. You know, I want my kid to add 4 + 4. A quality education is giving your kids the resources that if they've never been taught the difference between Oxford and serial comma, they've seen it there and they know where to go and look and find it up. But the current aspects and lefts of our society does not want that to happen. They don't want a kid independent. They want you to know 27 genders. They want to teach you that all of a sudden, just because you happen to be a young boy and one day at 4 years old, you just tried on your grandma's shoes for some reason, now you're all of a sudden want to be a woman. You can't even smoke a cigarette yet. Can't get a drink. So we need to understand first what is a quality education, and particularly with young women. I think this is very, very important. I have 2 daughters of my own. I have a wife. Most of our employees are women. Most of the people in this room are women, which, by the way, is a whole nother speech in of itself. It's very sad. It's very sad. We always talk about men being leaders, except where it counts. And I'm going to say this: thank you, men, for being here. Because our boys are growing up. Our boys are growing up to be emasculated. And then it doesn't help when they step into a classroom from ages kindergarten up until about junior high, and it's been all women all their lives. Especially now within the black home, where you have 72% single motherhood. We need more men in the room. It's important. And the left doesn't want that. I can get into that some other time. Let me move on, because I can easily, I'm an old school preacher from back in the day, so I can take a tangent and go with it. So I'm not gonna do that. We need to understand what quality education is, and then we need to understand what is our standard of excellence. Now, this is important relating to non-traditional conservatives, because I submit to you that most parents agree what a quality education is, and most parents agree what a standard of excellence is. You have some parents that don't. We can reach those later. Let's at least start with the ones that care. Take, for example, in New York, right? Harlem charter schools in New York. Parents who are impoverished. Parents who have, they make $25,000 a year. They have SNAP and all sorts of, and they still stand in line. They do whatever they have to do to get their kids in these special schools. Those parents understand what excellence is. You've heard the story of Dr. Ben Carson, whose mother couldn't read, but she had him do book reports. Why? Because she understood what excellence was. It's not that hard, it's not that difficult. And we can't fool ourselves. Corporate America understands what excellence is. They're preaching to you and your kids, to me and my kids, to middle class kids, low income kids, that you can't take the test, you can't understand it, this is racist, knowing a verb is a racist, now mathematics is racist. That's what they're preaching. But I double dog dare you to try to go and work for Apple, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Facebook, keep going, Verizon, AT&T. Try to work for any of these companies can't understand pre-algebra. They won't let you in the door. You want the proof of it? Go to the websites, look up their employees, look at where they graduated from, and look at the numerous awards they have going all the way back to high school. These media companies aren't trying to show you excellence for your kids. They're trying to show you mediocrity. That's, by the way, a point that is cross-ethnic cultures. When you're talking to HAPs or engaging with a African-American, a Black Democratic parent or Hispanic parent, that's a fact you can use. That's something you can point out. That you see all the stuff that's being pushed, the social justice. Guess what? The kids that are going to Twitter, that are going to Facebook, that are going to Google, that are going to AT&T, that are going to Verizon, that are going to the upper echelons of McDonald's, PepsiCo, and Coca-Cola, their kids don't do this stuff. Their kids don't interact in social justice. You heard it the best when the Waldorf school, I think in Silicon Valley, where I think 85% of all CEOs of these major corporations send their kids. They're in that school, those kids aren't even allowed to touch an iPad until 8th grade. But with your kids, you're told, oh, we need more money per student. We need $5,000 per student. We need $10,000 per student. We gotta have iPads and technologies so they can shove images in your kids' faces. And I don't care what the left tells you, I've been Black all my life. And I can tell you right now, the majority of Black parents, I don't care how they vote, are not on board with this nonsense. And so when you start to interact with individuals who don't come from your same culture, your same background, your same conservative beliefs, you can always interact with them on the belief that you have that your kids need the best that they can get and better than what you got. That is a common point that works. Because the left would have you believe that black parents are talking about social justice, are talking about 27 genders, are talking about pronouns, they, them, those, and this. They would have you believe that, but that is not the case. African American parents are just like every other set of parents. They care about the growth of their kids. And so when you're dealing with them in schools, don't get distracted by January 6th. Don't get distracted by Donald Trump. Don't get distracted by Comrade Biden. Don't get distracted by any of that. Focus narrowly in on excellence and quality education. And that has to be the framework as we begin to rebuild our school boards that we approach this from. School boards are different than board of directors. This is an important point. We tend to think of school boards as board of directors. A board of directors are people that meet quarterly, and they provide an overall guidance. I don't know how you've been members of boards, but I've been members of a couple major boards, right? You provide some quarterly guidance. And maybe you're there to really correct something that a CEO does that's absolutely crazy. But by and large part, the CEO of a corporation can come in with a huge vision and execute it, and as long as it's giving shareholder returns, the board lets him go with it. That's why Zuckerberg can do what he does. Jack Dorsey at Twitter can do what he does, right? Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. And so what we've done is somehow we have fooled ourselves into believing that a school board is similar to a board of directors. We hire this superintendent, lady or male. They come in with all of this stuff that is nowhere aligned with what you're thinking, and you throw up your hands and you say, whoo, that's the expert right there. Okay, that's the expert. I don't know what it is. That's the expert. That's hogwash. A superintendent and a principal and a teacher are executors of the agenda that you have laid out as a school board. They're not there to reinterpret you. They're not there to correct you. They are there to carry out what you want them to. And that's very, very important to understand and for us to digest. They should be hired because they're great executioners, not because they have a bunch of ideas. The ideas have to come for you. And I know we love to overcomplicate things as human beings. And I don't want to disappoint any people with PhDs and educational doctorates in here. But I'm going to tell you a secret. Basic education is not that difficult. Tons of homeschool parents do it. And for years during the pioneer era, it was done. Poor black families did it. Learning to read is not that difficult. We had figured out in the late 50s, some of you that are educators know this, in the early 60s, we figured out a formula that get 99.5% of kids to read accurately every single time. What's the greatest predictor of success? Reading at your grade level. That is we have known this for decades. That alone is the greatest predictor of success. And if you turn to a jail or you turn to a prison and you look at the literacy rate and you see how piss poor it is, right? A person's job and where they're employed can be directly attributed to where their reading level is. We know this. So why are we allowing teachers and educators and people with Rhodes scholarships, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, we're allowing them to come in and tell us something and that's the antithesis of what we know. Your kid needs to be able to read to survive. And if you're teaching anything other than that in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, 7th, 8th grade, you got a problem. Let me give you another illustration. We know reading is so easy. Slave times. What was the #1 rule? do not teach a slave child to read. And they got very concerned because look up Frederick Douglass, look up a lot of the famous slaves. They learned how to read because before they became of age to be able to work, they played with kids. They played with their master's kids. And those kids were learning how to read and talk. In other words, reading is so damn easy, right? Reading is so damn easy that one 5-year-old could teach another 5-year-old how to do it. And yet somehow, we all of a sudden have overcomplicated ourselves. The next thing we got to do as a school board, we need to define what we do versus what other people do. This is very, very important. And this is the hard one. This is the hard one. Grew up with no money, grew up broke, busted, and disgusted. 2-bedroom house in Michigan. We moved from the hood to the white neighborhood, had the horrible, worst looking house in the white neighborhood. Get this though, right? Get this. We grew up with that and we had all of that, all of those issues and all of that problems. But I never went to school hungry. Now I know this is some people are gonna I'm gonna make some folks nervous, but I'm gonna share something with you that's very important as a school board. As parents, you are a parent first. It is not your job to feed breakfast. I know it's harsh, but we have got to get parents to understand. Your kid needs to be dropped off to school emotionally ready and physically ready to learn. They have to be. And as a school board, once you're elected by parents, because those are parents who care, that vote, right? They stand up. This is where a little bit of leadership comes in now, a little bit different than before. You're doing a leader and you're saying, listen, you gotta feed your kids. Because let me tell you something. It's no surprise kids grow up relying on the government. If the government has been feeding them from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed. That's no surprise. And ultimately, I talk to a lot of teachers, they always say, I can tell how kids are gonna do in their first couple of years. Because I can look at how many parent-teacher conferences appear. I can look at what kids go home and talk to the parents and comes back, and how fast parents respond to me from an email I send them or a phone call I give them. If a parent doesn't give a damn enough to feed their kid before they arrive at school, you can forget about the rest of it. That's gotta be in your head. And for those of you who grew up with no money and broke, right? Wearing secondhand clothes, doing stuff, the one thing you never went was hungry. That's the one thing you never did. You went hungry. If it was Frosted Flakes, bread, peanut butter and jelly, whatever it was, you were fed. Now maybe when you got to lunch, you had some school assistance. Okay. I'm shorter on time than I thought, so I'm gonna do some skipping. I'm gonna do some skipping. The last thing, real quick, I've skipped a whole bunch, so I'm gonna tighten this up to 50 seconds now. The last thing we need to do is it's not enough to be reactionary. We as conservatives are always reactionary. We're going to parents, we're going to people that we don't normally talk to, and we're reacting to what they do. They meaning the left. We need to be proactive about what we can do and what we should be doing. And when I say proactive, let me be very clear. If there's a new skill set out there, for example, 55% of people in the next 5 years in the country are gonna have a side hustle. That means they're gonna have a business of their own, right? Well, if you've owned your own business, you know that accounting, understanding a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet is pretty important. So one of the things that we could do that's a proactive is say, you know what we want to do in our high schools? We're going to add a program where all kids need to take Accounting 101. Not only will it help you personally, but it'll help you when you do your side hustle as well. Because believe this, all of these people that are idolized, the Kardashians, they understand what a profit and loss balance sheet is. They understand it very, very clearly. Cardi B, she understands it. And if we begin as conservatives to be proactive instead of reactive, we can be the leaders of change. And one of the reasons we're not leaders of change is because we spend too much time reacting to what everybody else does and not a time of offering new solutions and new ideas. It doesn't mean we're changing classical education. It means we're expanding. But if you're always the people that react, then you'll never be seen as a leader. That's one of the most important things to remember, particularly in schooling. So when you're dealing with people outside of this conservative mainframe, do this. One, understand what quality education is. Get an agreement on that. Understand what a standards of excellence is. Get an agreement on that. Understand what a parent's role is. Get agreement on that. And then begin to bring solutions to the table. Because at that point, you've agreed on the basics and their minds and their hearts are open to what you have to say. Thank you so much.